Hello and welcome to On Second Thought with Mike and Luke, an ongoing conversation about the underlying connections and root causes which shape our lives through various ideas and current events. As we reflect on what's true in our world, we hope you'll be challenged to think again and then to engage with wisdom in our increasingly hostile and hurting culture. I'm Mike, and this is Luke across from me, and
good morning.
It's been 10 days. We had holidays, Christmas.
New Year's coming up.
New Year's. You got to tell you're funny. New Year's what? It's not New Year's Eve. Two days
today,
before.
Yeah. It's New Year's Adam.
New Year's Adam.
Because Adam comes before Eve.
Adam was created first, at least in the Genesis 2
Christian
version.
Nerds.
Yeah, so today what we're going to talk about is national politics in 2024. It's supposedly going to be quite a year. Tucker Carlson thinks it's going to be the most explosive year in American history.
Yep.
We're going to talk about some new ideas and what to do about new ideas and how to approach them, and then we're going to talk a little bit about valuing art. So you got an intriguing question here. Melissa actually saw this one and read it out to me.
The architecture question.
The architecture question. What's your question?
Well,
how did it come about?
So I heard a statistic that more people visit Europe each year than live in Europe. And they go there for the purpose of seeing architecture, almost completely, right?
Is it architecture in the broad sense, like old buildings, or do you mean architecture like Ionic columns versus Renaissance, Gothic
no,
art?
I mean in the sense of just appreciating these huge buildings, these incredible,
the majesty
historic buildings,
historic.
almost exclusively built to honor Christ, and thinking is architecture the highest art form? You know, high art versus low art is almost. There's 1,000 ways to think about it, but the biggest one is art that lasts.
Yeah.
Is more meaningful.
Now, your post didn't ask the question. You put it in our format asking a question, but your post made the assertion.
Yeah.
So why do you think? Why give your thing? So I don't know if I would be on that page, but
well, I think it has
why.
the most impact for the longest amount of time. I think it's a deep expression of what you care about. If you go through a city or a town that's generally ugly, it reflects the culture of that town or that city. I think it's simple ways you could improve a town, even like ours. I think often about how we could bring a higher form of architecture and not just, brick cubes. And at the same time, when you see American culture rejecting tradition, and especially in the 60s, but continuing on, you get these brick cubes. You get this ugliness that is idealistic and kind of weirdly utopian, but at the same time, it takes out all the detail, the nuance. And they'll say it's complex and inspired and has all this meaning, but when you look at it, it's just brutality. It's imposing and oppressive.
Are you familiar with Mike Jones's work on architecture?
No.
As art? You'd be interested in it. He advocates the idea that the post-Kant worldview that took away absolutes changed the nature of how we think about beauty, about whatnot, and that it worked its way into all art forms and speech forms, but he focuses on architecture.
Okay.
And he believes that there is a development of despair as architecture comes to what we would consider modern. And there are flares. I don't know exactly. I don't remember what he says like about the Art Deco, for example, age, which was an interesting thing. But he compares it to a worldview prior to Kant and Hume and what happened with that line of, Schaeffer calls it line of despair, as having a vision of God as a part of the world, and it was reflected in art, in architecture in particular.
My understanding of architecture is that the Art Deco is sort of the last architectural movement before we get into this oversimplified modernism.
Yeah, nihilistic.
And forgive me if I'm not, someone who's trained in architecture will know a lot of other things. But what I see in that movement, and I see it like when we visited Paris, all the train stops are these Art Deco. It looks like they're trying to mimic nature. It feels almost like a return to paganism. But after paganism came nihilism, right? And that now we visited, Nicole and I, in the early 2000s, Latvia, and I got to go there a couple times. And one visit, we went to the Museum of the Occupation. They were one of those unfortunate Eastern European countries that was first conquered by Soviets, then the Nazis, then the Soviets again. And they took one of these brutalist black cubic buildings and turned it into the Museum of Oppression, essentially, the story of their oppression.
Yeah.
And it's exemplified in this building.
Yeah.
And Latvia, their architecture was spared. They have a beautiful capital city and a downtown that's historic, and
Yeah.
That
I think we almost have two questions going here. You started with, is it the highest art form? But then you're really talking about the effect of ideas on art and on cities and architecture and what it creates. Whether that's the highest form or not, it's almost like there's two forms of your question. Because I completely agree with the second part, is that it is an expression of beliefs.
Which is all art,
Yeah.
is an expression
Yeah.
of beliefs. And I
But
think that's
even
one
buildings,
of the defining
I think
characteristics.
that's what's surprising about buildings.
But buildings done well last for centuries.
Yeah.
And so is your culture one that will last? I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
Will your grandchildren tear down the art you made?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be necessarily Christian to last, though, right? I mean, the Parthenon is still there from...
Yeah, and there's a universal beauty to it.
Yeah.
That we appreciate even today.
Yeah. But then the other question is it the highest form? Because I don't know if I would go there. I mean, you stated your reasons, but I think probably what I would lean towards is elements of painting and sculpture that deal with the human body.
Okay.
That deal with person.
So it's highest because that's the highest part of creation?
I probably would try to lay that out, and it might be a little bit of a weak argument, but yeah, that's where I would go initially.
Yeah,
Just
so I
thinking
think
about
there's a
the
depth.
most sublime element of creation.
Yeah. Okay. I could see that.
Yeah.
I think there's a depth to the truth, right? There's simple,
Yeah.
surfacey truths, and there's deeper meaning, and so that brings art to a higher level.
Yeah.
But there's also something that lasts about the form itself.
I hear that argument. Yeah.
I mean, if you think of the Mona Lisa and how
Almost civilizational rather than generational.
well, civilization is built on these things. I think art and
I'm saying
civilization
that
are
buildings
intertwined.
are civilizational more than paintings are.
Yeah. Well,
Paintings are for an era.
even the
but
Renaissance,
buildings-
what sets those paintings apart, and I'm not a huge fan of Renaissance art, but is their architecture actually in the paintings.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big aspects of it was they began to understand perspective and geometry in ways that had sort of been lost in the Middle Ages.
Yeah. Well, if you're enjoying the conversation, make sure to click and subscribe, and you can get our next episode sent to you automatically. You can also leave a comment, review, all these little words that have become more than verbs now.
Yeah.
Then share with a friend. All right, let's segue into another segment here.
Yeah.
The opening segment on new ideas. We each incidentally happen to come with a new ideas. We'll go ahead and start with yours, and then I'll do mine. But I just want to ask the question before we get to the idea that you posted something and I have something I thought about. Let me make this statement. I had a new idea on Christmas Eve, and it's a pretty rare thing. I think a lot, read a lot. It's really hard to have a new idea just to yourself. It's not that somebody else couldn't have thought about it, but something you don't know that you've read or seen or heard anywhere else and never have thought yourself before.
Yeah, it's easy to make connections.
It's easy to make connections and get insights from that. And they can be new insights. But to have a new idea, it's happened to me probably 3 or 4 times in my life.
Okay.
Where I felt like I had a brand new idea. Have you ever had that phenomenon or that experience or sense or
I haven't stopped to think about it separate from. I love making connections. That's the thing I do
Same
all
with
the
me.
time.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I focus on.
Yeah. Okay, so when you make a connection or have a new idea, you put it out there to be tested, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not sure. You might think you see something, and you might even be really convinced you see something.
And so I have a couple methods for this too. What I find is if I put it out there as a question, I get almost no feedback.
You make an assertion.
So what I've been doing lately is testing it as a statement.
Yeah.
And then people want to give feedback to statements.
Yeah.
Right? And that was that example
I'm
we'll
the
talk
opposite
about
of
in
you.
the future.
I do it as questions, and I get plenty of feedback.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, you just keep asking until somebody
I
talks
do.
to you about it.
I will ask about things for 6 months to a year, about something I'm chewing on, a question.
Yeah.
And I find people enjoy it as a conversation piece. They find it a little bit of intrigue. And if they don't, that's fine. We move on. I'll ask it again somewhere else.
Right.
All right. So we each going to test a thing here to see how. But the other thing about testing is you get the opportunity for pushback. in ways that you didn't think. So start with yours. What do you assert in the realm of social media?
All right, so I was watching Instagram. My wife and I have this new thing where we both sit side by side on the couch. If we have our phones going and the TV going, then it pulls too much internet, and our boys start to complain that their video games don't work fast enough. So anyway, the other night,
even with the lightning speeds here where we live,
so Nicole and I are scrolling through Instagram, and I see this clip, and it's a channel about fatherhood. And this guy is taking a moment to talk about his marriage. And he says that he craves his wife's desire. That not just that she would agree to be intimate, but that she would desire him. And his plan, he asked her, what could I do to inspire you more to desire me? And she didn't know. And she thought about it and came back and basically gave him a list of like, spend more quality time, do more acts of service. And I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about how does Jesus lead? And so anyway, I wrote this little comment. I'll just read it.
You gonna read the whole thing?
Well, I'll summarize it. It's a little bit long. Basically,
if you read it, just read it. But
all right, well, I'll read it then.
All right. We're gonna invoke controversy.
Here we go. Husbands who long to be desired by your wife. Sex doesn't start in the kitchen. Quality time and service will inspire feelings of comfort and connection, but that won't create more desire. It may get more of other good things, and she will likely say yes to your advances more often, but her desire doesn't come from your kindness. It comes from the amount of power you display, your ability to make things happen. At times, it will look like danger or even darkness, fierce determination, and a drive toward your God-given purpose. That purpose is not her. It is your calling in life, the skills you acquire, the creativity you awaken. Don't chase her and don't hide from her. Find your creative purpose, make it happen, then stop and include her. P.S. She likely doesn't understand this about herself, so when asked, she will tell you how to decrease her stress, thus making her more likely to agree to be intimate. This is not desire, but cooperation. You can have both, be powerful and loving, like Jesus. P.P.S. It is your job as leader of your house to understand your wife. Don't fall for the nonsense out there that you can quote, yes, dear, your way into a happy life. Take the lead. So I think the P.S. is what inspired the most
I would imagine
commentary, but almost exclusively positive. I had one person asking questions and wants to talk later. But almost all the comments are from women, and almost all the likes are from men, which is really, I think, par for the course on Facebook too. Interested in your thoughts?
Okay.
Yeah.
I have 4 thoughts.
Ooh, okay.
I have 5 when you throw in the quote that it started from, because it's a little separate from that. All right. Thought number 1. It doesn't start, her desire, comes from power, the idea of power.
Yeah.
You're distinguishing desire as the sexual development of it.
Yep. Right.
Not necessarily romantic feelings. You're talking about the transition from feelings of good relational romance to sexualized desire.
Yeah. So comfort and safety is what I would say. I think it all combines to be romance. Romance is both comfort and safety and
okay, but then you
confidence
stage 1 and stage 2. Or they're.
I don't know if they're separate.
You've made them separate. She will likely say yes to your advances. So
right. What I'm saying, I don't know that they're stage 1 and stage 2. I don't think they're incremental.
I don't mean them that way. I just mean stage isn't the right word.
Components.
They're different aspects.
Yep. Yeah.
Because I do think there's some truth in that, but I also tend to think that's a masculinized approach. So because you're tying sexual desire to power, danger, darkness, and we've actually talked about that a little bit. The young girl who likes the bad boy,
right,
for a season.
Yeah,
it's exciting, and I agree with that. I don't know if I would personally think that is an exclusive way to define the sexualized form of romance, because I think, like you said earlier, the care and safety and concern and talking and feeling, spending an afternoon together, all those can create the very same thing, but it's a different version of the danger kind. Of the kind that electrifies, like we feel as men, almost exclusively. That's almost all. But I don't think that has to be all of women's sexual desire.
Yeah. Well, part of what I'm exploring is this concept that I think it of my sons.
Yeah.
And as they move toward marriage or thinking about how do you become the person that is worthy of a valuable woman, right?
Yeah.
And I see the pattern of the Christian nice guy, right, who follows all the rules,
beta male,
and thinks, well, he might be the beta male, he might not, but he thinks that the way to a woman's heart is through service.
I understand what you're saying.
And that's sort of been put forward as this is what Jesus meant when he said the greatest among you is the servant of all. But what I also see, and this is what I've been exploring.
It does have to mean that. He said literally, the greatest among you is the servant of all.
Well, the question is, what does it mean to serve?
Yes, that's exactly right.
And so what I've also been exploring is who was it that followed Jesus, and what amazed or impressed or inspired people about him. Mm-hmm. So one of them is he preaches with authority, right? And that authority in particular is over spiritual darkness, that he's transformational. When Jesus arrives, people are changed. So that's where I explored this idea of power, that he doesn't just show up with a lot of talk. He doesn't just help. He's not just the guy who anybody needs help, he's going to help. And let's explain, he's also transforming communities, transforming lives. That's literally the definition of the church, is the collection of people whose lives are transformed by his powerful leadership. I think, okay, that's the model very clearly in Scripture for a husband to his wife, that her life is transformed by his power and his leadership. And so I think that's a missing component.
Your verse, that husbands should love their wives, and then the phrase is, as Christ loves the church.
That's right.
So how does he love the church?
Right.
In what ways does he serve her? I came not to be served, but to serve.
Yeah.
So if you look at that, what you're really saying is that his service has this element of power. It isn't just the service reflected in obedience to a master. It is the service that is also reflected in leadership in that same. So he says to the Father, I will go and you do your will, but he also is an active doer of that will.
Right.
Yeah.
It actually, and it connects to, and we'll talk about it later if we get to it, but the idea of carrying your cross.
We'll get to that. I thought that was a good point, and I shared my little bit of ambivalence about balance. But the second thing is the purpose, your God-given purpose is not her, it is your calling in life. And you had it capped. It is not her.
Right.
So I probably would, I think you're onto a right point, but I probably wouldn't have put it as strong as you, because I do think it's her. So I think when God made man and gave him purpose, there is one of the two stories that reflect creation and says, this isn't good.
Right.
Him going out and doing his calling by himself is not good.
Right.
I need to make somebody who's with him, and forget the conversation about helpmate and all that, whatever that means. But just call it a companion for the moment, a co-dominion person.
So how does she become the calling if he has one already?
I'm not saying you're using the word "the" in a particularized way, which is fine. If that's what you're combating, I agree with you. She's not the calling.
Yeah.
But it's not the calling in the created world, and she's just added in later. That God says is not sufficient. That is not
Isn't
good.
that the story itself? There's a calling and she's added in later?
Because God says that's a problem.
Okay.
That's not good. So for man to seek his calling and then add her in is because there's a problem. She's to be a part of his calling. So I don't deny at all. I think you're right in saying that his calling is to go out and build and create. But I wouldn't do the thing about, in caps, it's not her. I think she is his calling. As Christ loved the church. So he loved his entire, you could say, his entire ministry in all he did was about his bride. Everything.
Yeah, I would totally disagree.
Yeah.
So I think the Genesis story is God's design. I think it plays out in popular culture a lot that we just don't see it. I don't even think that the church is Jesus' mission. I think dominion is Jesus' mission, that he's come in to do what Adam could have done if he'd only obeyed. And so the church is his bride as he sets out to conquer the world. And which is, he then gives in the Great Commission an invitation for his bride to become part of the purpose that he set out to do, which is to glorify God by doing his will and taking dominion over the whole world. So here's a popular example. I think, I like to say it's the most romantic movie. We'll see if you agree. I'm sure you won't, but I think it's fun to say. The Princess Bride.
Oh, okay.
Okay. In the beginning of this story, Wesley, the farm boy, is literally the servant to this girl that he's in love with. And she loves him, but it can't stay that way. She, in that first phase, is his purpose. To love her, to serve her, as you wish, to whatever her desires. He has to go out and find his fortune. He literally has to go become a pirate, a killer, a rogue, who's dangerous because he's so unwavering in saying, I'll do whatever it takes to go where I need to go. Then he can come back and actually marry her. And I think that's the tale, is to say, each of these young men, you need to go be a man, figure out the man God's called you to be.
Yeah.
Then you'll find.
But what about in the where he rolls down the hill, she doesn't know he is, and he says, as you will.
Right.
So in other words, he never let go of that.
But he's serving her.
Exactly.
But now he's serving her in a different way, by leading her, by showing her the truth, that life is pain, right? All these things, that this is not an easy thing. We don't get this idyllic life on a farm, even though we may end up back there.
Yeah. So
first we have to see
that when he goes and does that, he still carries his intentions and desires for her as a main focus?
No, I think his intent and desire in the story is to go get her, right? But is to live out a life of conquest and power. And that's what makes him appealing to her.
Okay.
Yeah.
First PS, point number 3 for me, or response. She likely doesn't understand this about herself.
Yeah. ...
So did you get pushback on that? That was when I laughed when I just read it this morning. You had me.
A little bit. I think I saw a lot of women say, well, that doesn't, I'm not that way. And that's perfectly fine. There's exceptions to everything.
That's right. A 20-year-old.
Yeah. But I also had a lot of friends who said, I'll have to think about that. Because I think, my wife is a good example, when asked questions like this, or when I've heard women talk about it, they always talk about comfort and connection. Because when they think, I don't want to have sex with him right now, to be blunt, right? It's, I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel connected.
We should have given our PG-13
if you're listening to this and you don't know that sex exists, I apologize for reality. Okay. But I don't think that's I think it's an important piece. And as I said in there, it's good and it will create good things, but it's not enough.
So here was my thing when I laughed when I read it, is I would not have said it this way, but I have similar thoughts. I would have said them more carefully.
This is why we have a podcast.
That's right. But what I think is so interesting is the call, is in Scripture, and there could be some different reasons for it, but it is to understand your wife, to dwell with her with understanding.
That's right.
That call is not reversed. A wife is not given to understand. And in fact,
it's because we're so simple.
I was going to say, I wouldn't have said it that way. I was going to say from the other side that they often understand more about us than it's not hard for them. They see into us. Mary treasures these things in her heart. They are drawn towards mystery, and they want to understand this man, and they see things that we don't see. And we are simpler.
Yeah.
And your whole dog and cats, you want to do your dog and cat
So I had this theory that when men struggle to find a wife, they usually latch onto a dog. And when women struggle to find a husband, they often end up with cats. And I think it's because a cat, on average, its personality is like what women wish a husband was like.
It's mysterious, it's complex.
It adds to this concept. It's
layers upon layers. Onion is the ogre.
The cat sees itself as the king of your domain,
Shrek.
And you're offering it food, right?
That's true.
And it'll give you affection, but then it's going to go sit in the window to defend the castle, right?
Yeah.
And look out for other cats who want to come and take dominion.
Did you not do Shrek
Shrek's okay.
You don't, the onion thing?
Yeah.
Donkey, and there's a whole big thing. All right. Anyway.
Well, let me add the dogs thing, though.
Yeah.
Because I think this is just as funny. And that is that, what are dogs? Dogs are always happy to see you. They're there at the door, ready to do whatever you want to do. Sounds like the best thing they've ever heard of.
That's right.
They're enthusiastic and and unconditional.
Yeah.
And men long for that.
Yeah, I agree. And so what my thought on that topic or subject has been that women, I don't even think sometimes they understand themselves.
I don't understand myself half the time, so I don't see why.
But we don't care that much. Occasionally we care, but we don't care all the time.
Yeah, if it causes a problem, like why do I have these negative emotions and I don't know where they come from?
Problem. Otherwise, I'm not interested in, like Mary, treasuring these things in my heart.
Sure.
You know, she is interested in that, and she looks at her husband and wants to know those things. She looks at herself to know them, but it's a depth of mystery she can't. And I think what happens to men is to know this woman becomes I would start using words that you won't like, but mission and purpose and calling to understand her. And there's beauty in this depth of mystery.
Yeah.
And you end up seeing things she doesn't even see about herself. But you see them from a male perspective and not feminine. And I think that means she's blind to some things. And I think male can be blind to male things.
Sure.
And
I would add
that's a good thing.
Our role as husbands is to lead our wives well. And you cannot lead someone well that you don't understand.
Yeah.
And so in that way, that leadership is part of our God-given purpose.
Yeah. All right, the last one, P.S. It's your job as a leader to understand your wife. Don't fall for this. I completely, your PPS, I agree with every word in it.
And so,
and I wouldn't even
because you didn't read it all the way, but the idea of yes, dear, and happy wife, happy life.
Happy life. Yeah, take the lead. Don't fall for that, doing that. That, I agree with you. In fact, she will feel happy. I think that's living in the sin-cursed world dynamics. And she'll feel better in the moment for them.
Right.
Because she has more a feeling of control. She has more of the masculine things. And you'll feel better in the moment because she seems happier. But in the long run, her heart resents you.
Yeah.
And will turn against you. And it is a killer of relationship. You have to advance into the difficult thing of your own strength and power as male without dominating, and her own strength and power as female, but it's as a submissive like Jesus. And but those are very difficult to do. And she has to fight being manipulative, and he has to fight being dominating, but still lead. And yet, anyway, yeah.
Well, and on the other side of that is there are many women who feel that they're compelled to run things because the husband has decided, yes, dear, is the answer to
just
things.
A spiraling down.
Yeah, and
it's a reinforcing prophecy.
And how I would describe that is the husband pushing the wife toward her dysfunction.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
All right, hey, last one on this. When you said you got this all, how he craves his wife's desire. Mm-hmm. Incidentally, I've thought about this a lot because I've found that in me as well, and I've come to conclude it's a misstep for the man.
Okay.
This is my thought.
Yeah.
That it is, what it is it's masculinizing her. I want her to feel about me the way I so easily and quickly feel about her. And it's asking her to be male in her desires, in her sexuality. And what I have to remind myself is, no, Mike, don't do it that way. She wants to be desired. And that's my great gift to her. And in so doing, she will respond out of that.
Yeah.
I often want her to have the initiating desire, which is masculine. It's not, and we're on the 80-20 here, right? There's exceptions.
Yeah.
And then I can feel self-pity. Oh, she's not thinking about me like I think about her. She's not wired to think about me like I think about her.
Yeah.
When she does that, it's out of a response that is developed, not out of initiation that wants to go and take.
Okay.
And not that it can't occasionally happen like that, but I've thought about that, and I've had to tell myself, Mike, don't do that. I think that's out of balance. The
husband's role is to be the initiator.
You got to be the risk.
And that would include an intimacy.
And it includes the intimacy. And it includes the way that desire flows, the desire to take rather than the desire to be taken.
Okay.
When I have the moments of desire to be taken and want her to take, I'm actually in a feminine role. And I'm wanting her to be in a masculine role.
Well, and I don't know that desire.
Yeah.
When I'm describing desire, I'm not thinking of it like that hunger. Do you know, that sort of like, I want my needs met. But rather an enthusiasm of, I'm here because I want to be here, not because you want me to be here. Does that make sense?
I do.
And I think of it as, and I remember first time I read the Anglican Book of Prayer, and I discovered the marriage ceremony. And one of the vows was, with my body I will worship. And I'd never heard worship and sex being aligned in a spiritual way. And I think, okay, does Jesus want us to be enthusiastic in our worship of him? Or are we just there to receive? Well, no, we're not just there to receive. There's something about it.
But it is a response. He has initiated.
We respond to him.
And he wants ardor in return, the old word.
And so I think we're agreeing.
Response. I do too. I do too. It's interesting. I was with a couple, this has been a little bit ago, but within the past year. And this topic came up in a roundabout way. And we were playing a card game.
It's always weird to talk with couples about sex. Because I don't want to talk to someone else's wife about sex. Like,
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Anyway, she made the comment, the other person's wife said, well, I just say to him, come on over whenever you want. I didn't say anything in the moment. I almost did, and I've wondered if I should have, because my thought was, and I've meditated on it, reflected on it, and I think it's true, that really isn't what guys want. Occasionally we might think that's what we want, but that's not. It is more along, we do want what you're saying. We want the desire to be, well, I'm open and available whenever you want.
Right.
That's not bad in a sense, but we actually want something that's more personal.
Yeah.
I've awakened to you in this moment.
And if worship is a good metaphor for this, it's not wrong to say on Sunday mornings we worship. Like, we just make a schedule of it.
Did you know that in the old English Puritans, it was considered breaking the Sabbath to have sex on Sunday?
No,
it's unbiblical. It's not in the Bible anywhere, but this is the day of rest.
I feel like that's
and
what
so,
Sundays are for. That sounds blasphemous to me.
Jonathan Edwards' wife, they had 11 children, and she had several on Sunday. And
the children were born.
And the belief at the time was that they would be born on the day of conception. And so she was mildly embarrassed. And Edwards writes about it and talks about this theory can't be reasonable.
How nerdy was Edwards that's what he was writing about too?
It's totally
theology.
True. Totally true. Okay, well, listen, the Trinity School is a culture building enterprise. We do this under the umbrella of the Trinity School, but if you're interested in the things we talk about, maybe not just the things, even how we talk about it and why we talk about things, and you think, man, I'd love my kids to listen in on this conversation, at least most of them, but you could check out Luke's school he has for kids and unique things that they do. You can go to gracestaten.com/Trinity School. You can support a kid. You can support what he's doing. You can send your own kid. Anyway. All right, let's ask a pop culture question here.
Okay.
You have a comment about conservative. You have a question about conservative shows. You've noticed something, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be with you on this all the way, but I think I'm going to see your point and acknowledge it, just maybe not as universal.
Well,
you have the word "all." I might balk at all.
This is sort of my way. Okay, so conservative shows. I was thinking of what are the conservative shows, and Yellowstone comes up a lot for some reason.
That's true. Yellowstone. That's
and
true.
So, and I said, okay, well, what are the other ones? And I've been watching a little bit of this Reacher show and
Reacher. Jack Reacher.
But
did you read any of the
cop
books?
Shows, war movies, that kind of thing? No.
Yeah.
No. But one of the things I noticed about Yellowstone, and I've never watched it, but I see clips. If you're scrolling through, Facebook wants to show me Yellowstone clips.
Yeah.
And every clip that I get shown is a revenge tale. And so I posted this question, posed it to friends, like, is the whole Yellowstone thing just revenge? And they were all like, oh yeah, it's so great.
I don't agree with that. I watched a good portion of it until I there's nudity in it and it's gratuitous. And it's like, I can't do that.
That's why I never watched it.
Yeah. So I don't mind. Did you ever see Amistad? Sidebar.
Yeah.
So there's nudity on that too because they're slaves.
It's totally different.
It's totally different.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to put that caveat because we have people that listen and maybe even kids. I think nudity that's gratuitous is wrong to do.
Yeah.
But nudity happens in life, and I don't mind a story. Sometimes it
provocative
just
sexualized nudity is different.
Yeah, that's totally different. Right. And that's where they started going. It's like, I can't do that. So anyway, I did not think it was about revenge. Not that there wasn't a major theme
Maybe that's
of revenge.
just what gets clipped.
And especially gets developed. I thought it was about ownership.
Okay, like defending what's yours
That's
kind
right.
of thing.
That's right. It's our property, and they're taking away now.
But that is the conservative fantasy. The conservative, like, this is our country. You can't take it from us.
That's right. So it develops into a major theme of revenge because it's trying to be taken from them.
Because there's injustice.
Yeah, but that is like, that's a little bit growing all along, but that's much.
But how those seem so intertwined. I don't know that you can even separate them. Revenge and what'd you say, ownership?
Yeah. No,
because we only want revenge over things that we feel are our own.
No, well, that's true. But there's lots of movies, especially older ones, where there is going out and building, getting a piece of land, conquering it and building it, and there's this majestic component.
And then the bullies
there's a romance. There's always some kind of fight.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily revenge that's on plate. It's just defending your own against the marauders.
Yeah.
Revenge, I think, is you're probably right. It's more recent, though, I think, in terms of being a continual when it's attacked, because the deep state elite, all this, the injustice that we're seeing in our country.
Well, and I think the difference between
oppressive.
revenge and justice is if I want someone to have to pay for the wrong they did to you, then that's a little bit more like justice. If I want them to pay for what they did to me, now it's revenge, which is why the law, the Old Testament law, the community has to come together. Like your kids are disobedient. Parents don't just get to stone them.
Yeah.
They've got to bring them before the community and say, and get judged.
Yeah. So I would add to your thing, because the note of revenge, as, what do you think about this idea? You had said all conservative shows. What would you balk at the idea that there's an element of masculinity in these things too?
Well, I think as you describe protecting what God's given you, what you've earned, is very masculine.
Because I would say Top Gun Maverick, the second movie, was conservative in many respects, but it's not necessarily revenge, and it's not necessarily uber masculine. The first one was, but there's very much a sense in that movie of proving yourself again. Even when
you're old,
right? Even when you're old, that's right. That's
Boomers
right.
love that movie.
And even when you're old, in terms of an older man, right?
That's right.
And you know the story of the other Iceman. You know the backstory off camera that he actually died. And so when they show him in that state, that's opposed to...
Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer, yeah. His age is going to win.
Right.
Cruise is going to defy it just a little bit more. Right.
Which he's turning out, he's doing.
I happened to watch over the holidays Mission Impossible, whatever the last one, most recent one.
Yeah.
It was exceptional. It was very good. Okay, quick question on pop culture for you here. We won't spend time. Did you see John Schneider? Did you ever watch The Dukes of Hazzard? You weren't a kid. Did you watch it?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, it was the early 70s. You weren't even born yet. But it was
on TBS reruns growing up in high school. Yeah.
Okay.
But it was also Luke Duke, and I was Luke growing up, and there were not a lot of kids named Luke when I was a kid. So it was sort of like I latched on to it.
So John, the other guy, Bo,
okay.
John Schneider, who is also conservative, he has come out and made a statement, and he came under heavy criticism for it. He said, Joe Biden, you and your son ought to be tried, convicted of treason, and publicly hung.
Yeah.
What do you think about that statement?
Well, does Fauci
what do you think
go
about it factually?
On the same? Can we line up the gallows with Fauci and Collins too?
Make a case for it, and I'm not probably going to disagree. Well, anyway, Collins is an interesting one because he claims to be your brother
in Christ.
Yeah, that's right.
And then he sends dead baby parts to be experimented on. And
I know.
And
George Washington said the hardest thing he had to do when he convicted, I think it was Benedict Arnold, to be put to death, because maybe it wasn't Arnold, maybe it was somebody else, for treason, because he says he was my dear friend. But when I'm the general, I'm not a friend to anybody.
That's right. Yeah. So what's your question? Public? Should the executions be public? Should treason? Does treason deserve it?
There was a whole big flack about it, but I want your thoughts about the statement. Probably the hanging and quartering publicly. That idea. It is in our Constitution, not the hanging necessarily, but death penalty
for treason.
And for treason.
Yeah, I'm not against it. I mean, I think that the deaths that they're responsible for are on the scale of the Holocaust. If you think about if
Schneider is saying they need to be tried and a court finds them guilty, what's wrong with the statement?
Yeah, I don't know.
Just that it shocks people. That is shocking. Well, and one of the things you should come under examination, and I think you're guilty, but if your peers think it, then you should be hung for treason. I think
it's a sign of the softness of America, or the feminization, I think is the right term, right? That we took this phrase in the Constitution about cruel and unusual punishment and have worked our way till all punishment is cruel and unusual. And so now we just don't want any punishment.
I agree with that. I think that is exactly right, and I think it is a roundabout way. The biggest trouble we have politically is not enacting just things, not following up. You do the Russia, and you don't get convicted. You pay no penalty for crime after crime after crime when you have power. And all it takes to stop this, in my opinion, is somewhere along the line, they convict and send to prison, no matter right, left, and do 3 or 4 or 5 in a row, both sides, and oh my goodness, things will slow down.
Well, that's what justice does, but it has to be quick, and that's the struggle. And
decisive. I agree.
That is how our justice system has been corrupted.
I agree.
Is the constant delay of justice.
And in my opinion, it's the right is as guilty as the left on this. They do not follow through in Washington because they want the media fawning over them, even though they don't, and so they don't enact justice.
You mean Republicans?
Republicans.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them the right. I would call them the.
That's fine.
You know, when you watch the Globetrotters and there's the other team, that's what Republicans are. Okay. They're just the other team that the Democrats have paid to be out there with them.
Yeah. Okay, let's ask a couple questions. We're going into our second segment here. A couple political questions.
Okay.
I'm interested in your recommendation. I won't miss it. A couple political questions. Let's start with the Vivek statement that you noted. What did he say?
Yeah,
and why
so
did
we
you find
talked about
intriguing?
this a couple episodes back. Vivek was making these hints that the person that the Democrat machine or the establishment, right? It's not really Democrats, it's the establishment machine, is going to put forward to replace Biden. And I thought he must be talking about Harris. Right?
That's one of the options.
That's what because it was like, okay,
he was saying
Sasha she's
Stone
right there,
article saying that she thinks it's going to be Harris.
Okay.
I don't think that, but
I saw a follow-up where somebody was pressing Vivek in passing in one of these, in Iowa, there's all these diners and everybody's talking and somebody's got a phone out. And he said, he basically, without saying it, said it's Haley.
Yeah.
That the people who are...
Wait, the left for the Democrat
The establishment. Yeah. So what he said was...
Establishment, fine. But for the Democratic nomination.
No. That it'll be...
You said Harris for Biden.
Right.
So have you switched
It'll be Haley for Biden, but she won't be a Democrat.
Haley for Biden.
Right. So the same people who are trying to get Trump removed from the ticket have now all put their donations...
I thought your note was Haley was going to get handed off by the establishment for Trump. You're saying Haley for Biden.
So listen to this, okay? The people who are donating or funding these Soros DAs, as we like to say, that are pulling Trump off of now Maine has removed him from the
Colorado's
from the
back
ballot.
on, but
right. Those people are all funding Haley's campaign, and Vivek was pointing that out.
That's interesting. Now that could be true. It also could be a way to slander's not the right word. A nice hit on your opponent.
There's a hedge as well. Like if we're going to get any Republican, we get the one that will listen to us, which is what Haley is. She'll listen to the corporate people, right? She's trying to defend Disney against DeSantis refusing to accept their gender
There's no
ideology.
doubt that the establishment Republicans or the heels in the sand never Trumpers, because you and my wife were a never Trumper, but if I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my wife did not vote for him in 2016, did not like him.
Yeah.
Saw what he did and what was done to him, still didn't really like him, but voted for him willingly in 2020, but really still doesn't like him. So that's how I read you too. So that's a never Trumper that was willing to accommodate, but there are never Trumpers who dig their heels in and Cheney and whatnot, if they could assassinate him and not get caught, they would.
Yeah. No,
those Republicans you're saying would align with the Democratic Party, and they could align with Nikki Haley.
Well, I mean, if you think
the Democrats,
Biden's dead on wheels, just rolling his way to the next election, then he could get steamrolled really easily with a viable GOP candidate.
That's interesting. Do you think it's valid? Do you think do you think it has merit?
That is their strategy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's probably unlikely. It doesn't. Not that it doesn't have a reasonable ring to it, but that means Nikki Haley would have to switch parties.
I'm not saying she would switch parties. I'm saying that the machine would just back her and let Biden float, because Biden only became the nominee because the machine
rejected
back her as
a third party.
No, as a Republican.
Oh well, they're already doing that.
Yeah,
that's all her.
Their plan. What I'm saying is.
That's
they're
why
doing
she has
that,
traction.
But they're not. They're still going to have media that's supporting Biden currently. They're still going to have positive stories. They're still going to cover for the Hunter Biden laptop. Once they remove all that covering and support that they're currently still giving to Biden by default, and just give it to Haley,
as a Republican.
As a Republican.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think she's going to become the Republican nominee, only because it would be, I don't know what the establishment is, the Republican Never Trump Rhino establishment. Do you want to call it 20%?
20% of the population?
Of the Republican Party. They have the levers of power. But
I think it's more than that.
I think it's less. And
I think there's a big empty middle who just says, hey, I want to be neutral about all this.
Uh-huh.
And so 20%, if it's 20%, that's all you need.
I don't think that will, here's why I don't think it'll happen, is because they would lose. The Republican Party would revolt. Did you see the articles that somebody floated? And I'm assuming that back channeling, it's the Trump campaign doing it, but they covered their tracks. It's not come out that way. That Nikki Haley was, could be his vice president.
Right.
The backlash was enormous. The 80% do not want Nikki Haley. They do not like how she's campaigned.
Trump's 25% solid. That he can talk them into anything, and he knows that.
No, I don't think so. Tucker Carlson said, if it's Haley, I'm not voting for Trump.
Yeah. Tucker's got problems right now, but we can get to that another time. I don't think it'll work.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is signs are looking like that's the strategy.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to try to push Haley the way they pushed Biden.
Yeah.
And got Bernie out.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Second question is similar to it.
Okay.
I saw an article, David Marcus wrote an article, posted, for his own sake, DeSantis should drop out of the race.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm a supporter of DeSantis. As a primary, I would vote for him first. I'll vote for Trump, I'm a supporter of DeSantis.
Yeah.
But he's not winning. And the campaign has declined and is declining. And he says he should have done, anyway, forget what he should have done. At this point, he should back out. And what he would do is it would save his capital, because he's not going to be the nominee. And therefore, save face, say that I concede Trump, and I'm going to pull out, I'm going to put my support with Trump. Because what's happening right now is that, what's her name? Haley is got a wing of never Trumpers, and she gets all of them. Trump gets none of those votes, and DeSantis got none of those votes. Trump and DeSantis are arguing about the same group. The other, I'm going to call them 80%.
Yeah.
You might say it's less, but they're arguing for those votes. They're appealing to the same people, and his thing. And I thought it was a decent idea. I'm interested in your take on that.
I
he thinks it would make him stronger.
I don't think it would do that. I think it would look like quitting, and quitting without ever fighting, like without ever entering any race. Everything up till now, the only feedback we have is polls, but the polls are meaningless. And I think it's been clearly demonstrated that the machine wants Trump to be their opponent.
Yeah, I heard that all the time. I do not buy that.
Because they see Trump.
They fear him more than anybody.
I don't think they fear him at all. I think the fear is just
then
a
why
facade.
are they indicting him? Why are they desperately trying everything
because
they
Republicans
can?
dig their heels in when they do, and they know that. But the point is, I think, is that they see Trump and their narrative that he's going to become a dictator and that he's worse than Hitler. He is the moral fuel for their followers on the left to say, we'll do anything. will cheat at any level to stop Hitler from taking power. And you have to have that moral fuel to inspire the left, because that's what the left runs on, is a moral superiority.
I think that they started, Trump was the fuel that got that going in a major way, but I don't think they need Trump anymore.
If you look at the polls for every election since 2020, Trump's wing has underperformed by 5 to 15% everywhere.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
And so to say he's way ahead, well, that's just what happened.
No. Let's take Arizona. That's what happened in Arizona? No, it isn't. It was massive cheating.
It doesn't matter if it was cheating.
It does matter if it's cheating.
How does that change what's going to happen in the future?
It doesn't. I mean, I would say...
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I would say all along that I have not heard from Trump. How are you going to overcome in 2024 the cheating?
Okay.
But to me, that's a separate issue.
So we're going to assume that's going to continue.
I think that's true,
So to look at the polls and say, this is going to predict that DeSantis will lose Iowa,
no,
I think
this doesn't have anything to do with the polls.
That's the only evidence they have that DeSantis is somehow not succeeding.
No, that's not true. They have a number of people quitting the campaigns, donors that are changing over, major donors.
But that happens all the time everywhere.
I haven't heard of a single one.
I think you could say DeSantis' super PAC has had a lot of staff turnover. But as to how that affects what people vote, I don't know how that has an impact.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting word, turnover, right? You would use turnover, and maybe that's the right word. I would use abandonment, and maybe that's the right word. They are a little different, even though they're both somebody walked out a door. Is it just turnover, or is it bailing ship?
Well, I think, are they getting pushed out for
Or
impropriety?
pushed out. It could be that too.
You can read all you want.
Yeah.
I don't think we could ever know. What I'm saying is, until somebody actually votes, which is what Iowa's in, 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Until there's an actual vote, I don't think there's any reason to do anything different.
Yeah.
I think what this sort of article is, and I'm seeing a lot of this sort of thing, is the Trump Inc., their last sort of push to get people to...
It could be.
Because
I don't know Davis Marcus. I've not read anything else by him ever.
Well, Human Events is Jack Posovic's... that's where the article came out.
Yeah.
And he's all in on Trump. He calls DeSantis every kind of name. It's all that he's the source of so much drama around DeSantis.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
It's pretty funny. I like him. And to the degree that I like Trump, I like Posobiec. But as far as him versus DeSantis, it's so off the rails. It's like
so you
middle school
treat
drama
this as a disingenuine. This is an act of war. This is somebody pretending to be.
It's a strategy.
It could be, yeah. Okay, let's go splitting conservatives before we move into our last segment, and we're gonna.
So splitting conservatives. So part of what Trump did to build a coalition.
I never did my new idea, by the way. We just moved on. That was my fault. All right, go.
Part of what Trump did, and part of what is it, Obergefell, the gay marriage ruling in the Supreme Court, is it took the gay marriage issue away from Republicans. It's just not on the forefront anymore because gay marriage has more or less been resolved. Until the Supreme Court makes it an issue again, it won't be.
In the political realm, yes.
And so a lot of people who looked at the left and say, you're crazy, but I can't go to Republicans because they won't allow gay marriage, have now said, oh, well, now it's not an issue. We can sort of go over there. Because Trump was pro-gay marriage long before Obama claimed to be, although that seems obvious that it was not true. But okay, so Trump brings in...
It's now clear that it wasn't true.
Right. Trump brings in Bruce Jenner, and he brings in David Rubin, and these other people who say, well, we're Republicans, but we're homosexual or we're transgender or whatever. Okay, and it's sort of... There's a part of the Republican Party that says, well, this is our coalition, right? We're going to stop communism. But the Republican Christian looks at that and says, we don't need more debauchery. That's how we got into this mess.
Yes,
right?
This is true.
So if you lead that down, if you say, okay, so how far into it do we go? I think it comes down to the roles of husband and wife in marriage. So this last week, somebody put out a conservative dad calendar or something like that. And in it was pictures of people like Riley Gaines and some of these other conservative women in bikinis.
I knew you were going to say that.
And so the Christian Republicans are like, what are you doing, right? What's the point of this? You're going to say you're conservative and you're putting out bikini calendars for dudes?
Soft porn.
Right. And so I think that is the dividing line, is Christian and non-Christian in the conservative movement. And I see it as a wedge opportunity for the left, just political strategy speaking, is what's the inspiring ideal that drives conservatism? What are we trying to conserve? What are we going back to? Are we going back to the 80s? Mm-hmm. Or are we going back to the 1880s? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you like thinking of conservative that way, and I don't. But that aside, I think you're right in what you're seeing, correct in what you're seeing. This is a strange time for Republicans. I was thinking about this very same idea, or the right, we'll say. I was thinking about the same idea with how I think right now, for this very moment, about, what's her name, Harry Potter?
J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, the TERFs.
She's my ally right now.
As to the degree she's against the trans madness.
And that's the biggest assault on humanity going on right now.
Okay.
Right? Well, maybe not the biggest, maybe abortion. I mean, they're both killing children. That's what you're really doing.
Right.
and then not only that, and she is completely correct, this is an assault on women. All that we have been fighting for in feminism.
Right.
This trans madness is an assault on womanhood. And so it is this. You've got Hitler, you've got Churchill and Roosevelt, and now you've got Stalin. And the three align. Stalin aligns with Churchill and Roosevelt because Hitler is going to kill them all.
He's off the rails, yeah.
And so here, this wicked Stalin, this tyrant who's murdered his own mass genocide, allies with the Americans and Churchill, which are for freedom, let's say, to win a war.
So you're saying Patton was right. We should have, as soon as Hitler surrendered, we should have attacked Stalin?
I mean, there is a truth to that.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree.
There is a truth to it.
Because I think what you get then is the sunk cost fallacy that, like, well, we backed the Soviets during the war. We kind of got to defend them now. You know, you dance with the one who brung you. So Stalin, if he hadn't gotten into World War II, we probably would have lost it to Hitler. That Eastern Front was a massive advantage.
We lost it to it was their loss for our win, because that front was a massive
they
for
got
them.
to conquer half of Europe in the process.
Yeah, they got back that. But that's what I hear you saying is, in a sense, that the Allied forces, that's the name of it, right?
And it became the post-war mentality of the West.
And the U.S.
The communists
Russia.
are not so bad. Which is this weird how the Cold War...
The Cold War developed out of it, but in any case, the only point being, for that season, there was an alliance that is weird. Somebody's called it strange bedfellows.
Sure.
And that's what you're pointing out here, is that we have a weird alliance taking place right now for certain regions. And what I hear you saying is that might be fine at a certain political level, but underneath that is real ill health.
I think everybody, it's sort of like nominal Christianity. That you can say, well, I like Christianity, but I don't like this thing, this thing that I want to keep doing, right? So Dave Rubin is on the Daily Wire platform. Is that right? Or is it The Blaze? I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
So he's defending conservative values. He's talking about wholesome families, but he's also paying some woman to be, to farm a baby so that he and his so-called husband can purchase a child.
Yep.
There's about nothing less conservative than that. But then people like Jordan Peterson and these others are going to his defense and congratulating him along the way. And so it is the question that conservatism will have to face. Well, are we Christian or not? That's really
that is a legitimate point, I think. I think that you feel it more strongly. So if we, without getting into it, because I don't want us to, but the Christian thing that you're talking about, when I back away to a theistic thing, I have less issues with this than you do.
Right.
Even though I agree that you're seeing something accurate, I see more room in the political sphere for there to be disagreement. Work it out. Quasi function. And yet as a Christian, when I back away from the political process, and as a Christian, and which you don't like that whole dynamic that I back away in that way, then I agree with you completely. This is a fracture that is deep, and it's a spiritual matter, But, okay, give us a recommendation here. We're going to move into our last
All right, since it's the holiday season, the best Christmas movie, as I stated last time, the number one.
So I agree with you on this.
It's a Wonderful Life.
I agree with you. My wife picks White Christmas.
Mine does too.
It was a great question. You posted a couple
that's
episodes.
What my wife likes. Yeah.
I think The Sisters are fantastic.
So here's the argument I want to make, though. If you think of the premise of It's a Wonderful Life, it's more than just George Bailey suicidal, thinking his life meant nothing.
Okay.
But it's the story of a man who had these grand ambitions to see the world, to build skyscrapers, to do something impressive.
That's right.
Who sacrificed that vision to serve this small town. And again, he tries to escape, and then he sees these people, and he says, I have to help them. No one else can. And that is what I believe Jesus means when he says, if you're going to follow me, you have to carry a cross. You have to pick up your cross, and let's go.
I forgot, we were in the holidays, I was going to bring you that Tom Holland book, Dominion, in case you want to read it. But that's his, would you agree that, I mean, we talked a little bit about what the book is about. At least its main point is the world is more Christianized than it realizes. Even when it rejects God and becomes secular, it's doing so in Christianized terms.
Right.
And so would you apply that same thinking there? Because when you say that, my pushback is the movie never mentions God.
Sure.
Not a single time, and there is no Jesus, there is no cross. But what you're really saying is the storyline development is a cross-carrying motif in the movie. Because you're right.
That's right, yeah. Well, and
Would you say it's just unconsciously Christian in that sense? It doesn't realize the material it's taking?
I think anytime you speak the truth about how life is, you're going to find Christianity in it.
That's true.
So yes, I would agree with that. I think this might be what you meant or grew up meaning when you would use the phrase gospel-centered, is that you're seeing the gospel in all these places that others don't. Would you agree? Is that kind of the phrasing? I'm trying to use it rightly.
I know. No, but that's okay.
Okay.
But I'm going to give you your say, and I'm not going to contend your last point because I'll end up making one statement, and that's all I'm going to do. But I'm glad you said that. Interestingly, carrying your cross, because here's my beef, and I actually preached on it foolishly once.
Ooh.
I angered people in my own church, and it was unnecessary.
Okay.
Because I was younger, and there's a great benefit to being a provocateur, and there's a drawback to it.
I'm aware of this.
Yes, I know you're more of that than I am. But I preached a sermon on It's a Wonderful Life. I didn't preach on it. I used it as an illustration sermon, and I was making the point that it is not really a Christian film.
Okay, sure.
Because
it doesn't give glory to God.
It is not giving glory to God, and it's not even, he is happy not because of Jesus. It's a moral film.
Yeah.
It aligns with many Christian things, and it's decent and good.
Right.
But I said the same thing in the same sermon about Mayberry. It's a tremendous show.
Okay.
But it's not Christian. Let's not confuse it because it's so nice and wholesome with being Christian. Christian rises above theism and the moral requirements of God to aim at a cross and redemption and a substitution and a resurrection. If you don't have those things explicitly, it may draw from those things.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's not really Christian, even though it draws essence of Christianity from it. And I'm glad you said that. I think
it is an angel rescuing him, though.
You're right. It is an angel. That's true. But I'm glad you said it that way because it is a corrective from a storyline perspective. In a sense, you could see a cross that's non-identified functioning in his self-sacrifice.
And
giving his life away for his town.
That's right. What I see, and I wrestled with this concept around the George Floyd question of 2020. Because there is also, I think, the call that people were making in response to George Floyd, that I saw Christians making, was that there's this sin of the past, that we can bear it. We can take it like a cross and redeem it if we're willing to follow Jesus and do this. And I think that's exactly right. Mm-hmm. And it made me at the time think about my work with kids, right? When I'm working with a kid who's from a broken home, who's maybe adopted out of foster care, who's got all this dysfunction wrapped up in his genetics, and he's expressing it in terrible behavior and anger that has no reason, and all these things. What I'm doing by disciplining and loving and being patient and persistent with those kids is I'm bearing the weight of the sin that created that dysfunction. I'm carrying the cross. And and Paul talked about in his suffering, he completes what's lacking in Christ's
I got to
cross.
get that book, and I know you like watching shows more, but I think you'd enjoy this book, and it would be interesting.
There you go.
Because he's going to end up saying that behavior of caring for that person in the Jesus movement at the time, Rome said, that's stupid. You let the orphans perish. You let the kids from broken homes die. They don't deserve to live.
It's survival of the fittest. That's how we purify the civilization.
Shift to have a value by a culture to give your life for something like that is itself a Christian shift. It only is the cross that made that happen to begin with.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look and see, because what I think, the way I would describe Rome as you speak it is as an honor culture, that winning is the highest ideal. And that's how you create an empire. Honor cultures become empires, right? Feudal Japan, colonial Europe, all these places. Even Hitler was trying to, for the honor of Germany, for the Third Reign, right? They're trying to rebuild Rome themselves. But to say, if it is an empathy culture only born out of Christianity, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about it.
Okay, let's move on. We're going to do a listener question and then a final Bible thought. And we're going to meet our time frames here.
Okay.
All right. You and I both noted somebody, the last thumbnail, it said Trump is the devil
on our YouTube.
On the YouTube.
Yeah.
And you got a comment. Somebody made no, he's not the devil.
Yeah.
I got a comment. Somebody said to me, I did not like that. It's because that's not what you guys said in your podcast. It's not what you guys think, and it's clickbait and dishonest, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
And so I have the question. No, let me tell you the conversation Melissa and I had.
Okay.
Because then you can tell me if we're around. Because I don't want to make it like we're going to argue about it. I just want to tell you how I responded to it.
Yeah.
Because I don't like I think there's a dishonesty in clickbait
Luke,
too.
He does these things.
I did say that second. The first thing I said was, okay, yeah, I didn't like that at all. And I'm going to talk to Luke about it because it bothered me. But I said,
should it say Trump is a devil?
This is to Melissa. No, not a devil.
I'm just kidding.
I guessed as to why you put it there. I could be wrong. Actually, if I'm wrong, I don't even know if I want to know because I want to attribute to you the best motives I can. But I said to Melissa, I imagine Trump, Luke might say this. Well, have you seen all these articles about Trump is Hitler? Trump is Hitler. Trump is Hitler.
Right.
And he's tongue-in-cheek doing that same thing, exacerbating it. There is no Hitler's the highest human step to do for that in our culture.
Yeah.
There is no higher one that anybody can get than the devil.
You may as well just go to the devil.
May as well go to the devil. And I thought, I bet you Luke's going to say, I was tongue-in-cheek putting what they're saying. I don't believe he's the devil. I know you don't believe that, Mike. But it's funny. Why not amp it up? If you're going to say he's Hitler, I saw an article.
What's funny?
5 ways Hitler's preferable to Trump. So
is that a real article?
Yeah, a real article.
Oh my goodness.
A legitimate, not New York Times or Washington Post, I think.
Oh my gosh. No, that's totally it. What I heard somebody say about satire is there's no amount of satire. There's no extreme you can take satire until that someone won't say, how could you say something like that, right? That someone won't take it seriously.
That's the question. So if the Babylon Bee had done that, you come into it on the front side expecting satire.
Yeah.
When you put it up, I'm like, I know that's not what he thinks, but that's what it says.
Yeah.
And we're not like known for satire, right?
Well, maybe,
but anyway.
Maybe I'll go through and we can go that way.
So the question then is, let's just have a 2-minute on the question, clickbait.
Yeah.
There's things I don't like. There's things you like. Tell me what do you think about it? What do you think about the charge?
That it's disingenuous.
Yeah. What do you think about the feeling that some people have that's like, I don't like that for that reason?
So one time, I'll tell you a story, and I don't have a clear answer, but I think the story will shed light on it. One time we went, it was like a missions trip.
Because this is bigger than a you and I and the Trump thing in our little podcast.
Well, I'm going to make it about Christianity.
A huge thing.
In evangelism.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Good.
So we went on this little missions trip to Seattle, and there was a church plant getting started, and so our college group was going to go help.
Yeah.
And we were going to do evangelism. And they had a video, like a movie that was documentary style about what's the reality in spiritual things. But its title was not talking about Jesus, right? It was talking about horror movies. And the guy who made it was also there as part of the denomination to support this church plant.
Yeah.
So how did we get people to come to this movie? We went around saying there's a documentary about horror movies and the director will be there.
Bait and switch is what I thought.
And people were mad. I remember as soon as the movie got over, this dude stood up and he's like, this is not what I came for, and just walked out.
Yeah.
And that's when it struck me because I've been handing these flyers out all day and I thought, we lied to that guy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would argue that being
satirical
or exaggerating it stings of that a little bit, but I try to play with it.
Yeah. And Rush famously, he illustrates the absurd with the absurd.
And YouTube is a domain, in my experience, and maybe this is just from talking with teenagers, as I do, where all of that is expected. Like when I post something like that, my boys laugh and say, "Nice clickbait, Dad," But it's that, what I'm trying to do is
when you say people, that, you're saying in their minds, clickbait is just a part of life.
It's a part of YouTube.
And you have an inoculation that you build against it, so to speak, as you interact with it.
Because what I would say about that thumbnail, Trump is the devil, is I don't think anyone, maybe they think we're going to actually claim that he's the devil, but
That's
rather
true.
that it's going to pique their curiosity. What are these guys going to say about it?
Yeah. Okay, last segment, we'll do a little thing here. Go ahead and make your case, but I don't want to... Well, I'll let you... We'll do it last, and you can have the last word on that.
Okay.
I want to ask a question on Romans 1.
Yeah.
The meaning of the third four. Romans 1, 16, 17, and 18. 16 says, I am not ashamed of the gospel.
Yep.
Which I have actually a new insight based upon the Tom Holland idea of how he paints Rome. It was a shameful thing to have your God have been killed. Rome says, why in the world would you worship such a being?
Right.
And the Jewish leaders, we know, he's cursed on a tree.
Right.
He's not from God. Anyway, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. First four, it is the power of God. Okay, so his reason not being ashamed is because it's the power of God. It's unto salvation. Anyway, from faith. Anyway, second four, in it, in the gospel, is the righteousness of God out of faith, is revealed, a righteousness, actually, it's a righteousness, out of faith. So a different kind of righteousness is being revealed in this gospel. And then he goes on, the just, for it's written, the just shall live, verse 18.
So wait. So without the cross, we would still think righteousness was achieved by obeying the law.
That's right.
But because of the humiliation of the cross, we see something new.
A whole new kind.
And Romans is going to spell this out, that something new was actually there all along.
It was there all along.
We missed it.
We missed it, and we misinterpreted the law as if the law was what it was aimed at. That's the whole Abraham and David arguments in Romans 4. And now what he ends up calling it is, it's out of faith. So that when it says it's not by faith, it's ek pistu. It's this righteousness arrives from or is derived out of the source of faith. You can't even see it the same way as the other one.
Right.
You can't get to it the same way.
It's
totally
from faith
radical.
And for faith.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, verse 18, and I've always taken this, like Paul said that, okay, now it's his grand statement, introduction, I want to impart some gift, let me make this statement now. Now, let me start, I'm going to build theology. I'm going to start with creation in the fall and the disruption of mankind.
Yeah.
The problem is, in verse 18, it says for. And gar is in Greek. Gar means for. For is the ground or reason for what you just said.
Yeah. It's the next step in the logical
logic.
Progress.
It's an inextricable logic. I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for in it is the salvation of God. For, even deeper, in it is a righteousness, a new kind is revealed. For.
Yeah.
And that's the question. What is that last one? For a wrath. And it's not actually the wrath. And I know all the trends. It's a wrath or anger of God is being revealed from heaven against all. And it's the word ungodly. And then it's the same word where it says in it a righteousness. It's the same word, an unrighteousness of men. And then it says who suppress the truth in, same again, unrighteousness. So you got three righteousnesses there.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
But yeah, so the
question
question
the four
is,
keeps going and going.
I know, it keeps going.
Verse after verse.
I know, I know. But the rough shift for me, the one I don't understand is
18.
Is the 18 for. How is that the ground for in it the righteousness of God is revealed? That it's, I'm not ashamed because it's power, because it reveals something new, because there's wrath from heaven.
Yeah.
What's that logic? And then all the other fours flow out of the wrath from heaven and why there's wrath and anger. So I get those.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, just looking at it, right? So I'm going to call this first thoughts.
Yeah.
I would say if you take I'm not ashamed of the gospel, meaning there's this globally accepted method of pursuing honor and righteousness by your own efforts, okay? And so he's saying the gospel upends this completely because it's a new righteousness revealed a new method for obtaining the righteousness of God. That we didn't see it before, even though it was there all along.
Yes, that's right.
And so now he's going to go through and say, here's the evidence for it. Here's the driving part of it. So the wrath of God is sort of like, we've got this gospel revealed, the power of God for salvation, and the wrath of God has been sitting there all along, and you thought you were dealing with it by pursuing honor and righteousness through your efforts. But in fact, the wrath of God is revealed again and again, and even the pagans can see it, that the world is getting broken and worse, and only this new way can fix it.
Essentially, that's my answer too. I'm interested. I'm intrigued that you said it that way. You said it a little differently than I would have, but it's essentially the same thing. My answer was because the reason it says for is because the other two are the solution to the problem everyone's having.
And I would even twist that a little bit, and I would say, I think what he's saying in verse 18, the wrath of God is revealed from heaven above against all ungodliness.
Because the word revealed is the same when in it is revealed a righteousness.
Yeah.
Same exact word.
So I think what he's saying is, we see it in the gospel, and now this verse 18 is, even the world sees it. For even the wrath of God is revealed in the heavens. Like they see it too.
Well, not the gospel but
this need for some new righteousness.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
The need, or maybe they wouldn't even call it for a new righteousness, but a need for righteousness, and everything they're doing doesn't satisfy it, and they actually are suppressing the truth, and they're pursuing more and more antagonism, and that anger from heaven keeps being shown.
So this is an interesting, Paul does this a lot, and not just Paul, the Bible does this a lot, where it is saying, here's the reason why the pagans do what they do, right? And I think, okay, in my life, assuming or reading intent into someone's outward action is dangerous.
It's
do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I've talked to a lot of people who say, I don't go to church anymore because all they do is judge me. And I say, well, tell me about this. What did they do to judge you? They would look at me this one way when I would come into church on Sunday. And I think, they just looked because you came in.
Yeah.
Like,
that's right.
What are you reading into this, right?
Yeah.
So we all have this. Maybe they were right. Maybe they were reading judgment.
Yeah.
Maybe there was some disgusted face.
Sure.
But maybe there wasn't.
Not.
Maybe you saw it. So, but the Bible does it too. So I think there's this concept of this. What does it say in 1 Corinthians? The spiritual man judges all things, and yet is judged by no one. Like there is insight into how people work and what motivates them from God, but there's a counterfeit insight too that we all have functioning all the time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay, give me a thought on a gospel-centered. I'll make my one response. Well,
I think this might be worth doing another talk on. Maybe spend a chunk of an episode, because I really want to know more of what you mean or grew up meaning by gospel-centered. Because what I read it to mean is, and the article I linked to is...
this is our big topic.
Is like
this gets to our...
The Gospel Coalition...
Yeah.
And I put this as a first thought too. The Gospel Coalition saying, here's the way the gospel is reflected in the Taylor Swift New Era's
oh my goodness
concert tour. And it was laughable, and it got mocked incessantly by Christians.
Oh, I remember you
told me about that. And then the Gospel Coalition pulled it down.
Yes,
and I thought, okay, is this what gospel-centered mean? Is everywhere I look? You know, I look at George Bailey and I see him carrying a cross. I look at Taylor Swift and I see Jesus. And I think, well, this can very easily become, well, I see Jesus in the pro-choice, pro-abortion. You know, I see Jesus in this pagan temple. I see Jesus in the Satan worshipers. And it's like, come on.
Yeah.
There's got to be a line where we say, no, that's just not Jesus.
I don't think that's what it is.
Oh, I'm not saying that's what it is. But what I'm saying is, I think that's what kind of the way of Tim Keller was this like, oh, there's always this third way. There's always another way to look at it that sort of led us down this acceptance path. And that's what I want to talk about when it comes to gospel.
Let's talk about it then. I have to say I'm a little relieved. I didn't want to have this conversation. Okay, we're an hour 18, pretty decent. You've been listening on Second Thought with Mike and Luke. Hey, if you enjoyed the episode and the engagement and the conversation and generated your own thoughts, you found something to reconsider, share it with a friend, start a good conversation with them, and remember to dig a little deeper and think again. We'll see you next time.